This video goes with my article about building a bandsaw. My first test was to make a wooden pulley and make sure that worked. It seemed to work just fine. To get the wheels running totally true, I actually turned them using my bandsaw beginnings as a lathe. Once I had two wheels built, came time for a very important test, which is to make sure that they would actually successfully track a bandsaw blade on them without any sort of guides. So far so good. Now let's test it under power next. It works! Sweet! I used the blade from my 14-inch bandsaw, which is actually too short for this size wheel, but good enough for the test. I've got the beginning of my frame rigged up, and here I'm making the very first cuts with my bandsaw. Okay, next test is with a piece of maple. That's a little bit harder to cut. The little 1/3 horsepower motor that I started my experiments with is not quite strong enough for this one. Alright, time for a bigger motor, a 1.5 horsepower motor. Runs a little bit faster too. Watch that saw shake. This is when I realized I needed to balance those wheels. This is how I balance my wheels. It's just a matter of putting them on some really easily running ball bearings and seeing which side tends to drift towards the low side if I just let it spin freely. Clearly this wheel has got a heavy spot, so it's just a matter of waiting for it to settle at the bottom. Alright, I need to drill another balancing hole right about here. With better balanced wheels, time to do some more testing. This is cutting sideways through a piece of oak. A closer shot of doing a test cut in some pine. You can see my very improvised blade guide in this shot. Here's my really cool ratcheting blade tensioning mechanism. The springs on the right are actually the thing that holds the tension, and the thing I'm operating is a winch that tightens the springs. All this applies tension through a lever that moves the actual wheel, which is in the bracket at left, up and down. Once I've applied a lot of tension, I'm checking that the tracking still works, and also just that the blade sounds nice when you twang it. With enough blade tension, I don't actually really need a blade guide to keep the blade in place. The blade is tracking well enough to resist the force of the cut that I'm making here. There's no guides on this saw at this point whatsoever. I took this shot to get a sense of which direction the sawdust would get ejected from the saw. So I'm cutting through about 12 centimeters worth of maple here, and just watch that sawdust fly. And finally, an enclosure built for the saw. And of course, I have to do some more testing with another huge chunk of maple. This one's about 12 centimeters or about 5 inches wide, cutting right across it. Up to this point I had my blade running just on bare wood, but it was very loud, so I stretched some inner tube over the wheel to see if that would help.
Much quieter than before.
So this video was actually just a few random clips that I took while experimenting with building this bandsaw. To get the whole story, just go to the URL shown on the screen and you can see the whole article about this bandsaw.